What happens when gospel-style media blitzes and militarized rhetoric merge into a modern Christian crusade? Rewriting America's public sphere. Join me as we expose how this fusion of faith and power threatens our pluralist democracy and why it matters to every skeptic, ex-Christian, atheist, and anyone in minority groups or minority religions. Stay tuned. Welcome to Secular Strike Back. I'm Toothless Grin Kim. In the last year, the Department of Homeland Security has rolled out a series of slick recruitment videos that look more like Hollywood trailers than civic service ads. Clips show armed agents climbing into armored trucks, bombs being dropped from aircraft, and bleak aerial shots of deserted cities. In September 2025, Pete Hegseth, recently christened the Secretary of War, previously known as the Department of Defense, posted his own montage of combat footage set to a sweeping comic book soundtrack. One of the ice-focused spots even pairs a deep, growling voiceover with the biblical line from Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8, that says, "Here I am, send me." Hegseth's version goes further, overlaying the Lord's Prayer on images of fighter jets, missiles, and soldiers. As Missy Ryan observed for The Atlantic, these productions are not merely promotional. They are an invitation to answer a call from God and join a militarized vision of public service. For many adherents, Christianity is not a private faith but a political doctrine that must dominate every sphere of American life. Their worldview fuses a belief in Western expansion, patriarchal order, and authoritarian governance into a single, self-validating narrative. To question any part of that narrative, they argue, is to undermine the very foundation of their salvation. This Gestalt logic makes every belief interdependent. If God is assumed to side with the United States, then being a real Christian means defending the nation's policies, no matter how aggressive. Dissent is therefore framed not as a policy disagreement, but as a spiritual battle. Neighbors become enemies, and compromise is tantamount to apostasy. The cultural war that has simmered for a decade has recently been transformed into a concrete legislative agenda. Reproductive rights, the overturning of Roe v. Wade and subsequent attacks on abortion pills, birth control, and IVF, LGBTQ plus equality, flooding state houses with bills that aim to erase marriage equality, ban gender-affirming care, and scrub schools and libraries of queer-inclusive material. Historical narrative, removing books on race, gender, and U.S. history from curricula in public libraries. Voting and elections, pushing voter suppression measures and perpetuating the big lie about the 2020 election, while glorifying the January 6th insurrection. Together, these moves threaten the pluralistic foundations of American democracy and curtail personal freedoms. With Donald Trump back in the White House, a coalition of white Christian nationalists are slowly converting rhetoric into policy. Backed by a Republican-controlled Congress and a conservative Supreme Court, they are poised to reshape K-12 education and ban woke literature, strip away LGBTQ plus and reproductive rights, rewrite constitutional interpretation through a God-first lens. Christian nationalists hold a belief in which only those who share the dominant creed shape law and culture. If successful, the United States would become a two-tiered society. True Christians wield political power while people of other faiths or none are marginalized denied reproductive autonomy, and forced to accept a curated version of history and citizenship. Trump's presidency, and we're talking about combined between his first administration and second administration, his presidency all together, all in all. Trump's presidency turned religion into a political engine. The administration hosted evangelical endorsements and allowed federal employees to pray on the job, created religious liberty commissions and an anti-Christian bias task force, established a White House faith office. These structures paved the way for policies such as bans on transgender medical care, cuts to Planned Parenthood, a pro-Israel evangelical ambassador, and expansive religious exemptions. Supporters claim a restored moral compass. Critics argue that the separation of church and state is eroding. Beyond legislation, the cultural arena has become a front line. Universities, museums, public broadcasters, and other institutions perceived as left-leaning have been targeted for budget cuts, leadership changes, and policy shifts. Diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives have been rolled back, and research funding at elite colleges has been weaponized to enforce ideological conformity. Christian nationalism fuels a corrosive narrative that brands teachers, LGBTQ+ people, and even drag queen performers as groomers. This woke danger myth sows fear, delegitimizes expertise, and fractures social cohesion. The most vulnerable, such as immigrants, trans youth, women seeking reproductive care, bear the brunt of policy born from this fear-mongering. MAGA-aligned Christian nationalists have framed empathy itself as a national weakness. Best-selling books and public figures, including Elon Musk, has labeled compassion for the marginalized as toxic. By casting care for immigrants, trans people, and the poor as sinful, this rhetoric protects a hierarchy that rewards fear over kindness, eroding democratic norms and deepening bigotry. The stakes are clear. A single-minded theocracy threatens to rewrite America's promise of liberty, equality, and pluralism. Yet internal resistance, state courts, local activists, and a vibrant civil society press offers a counterbalance. The fight now is not merely political. It is a defense of society where multiple faiths, no faith, and all identities can coexist. In early 2025, former Fox News commentator Pete Hegseth assumed the nation's top civilian military post, a role traditionally defined by secular stewardship and unwavering professionalism. Yet Hegseth began carrying a markedly evangelical agenda. Weekly worship services on base, biblical slogans plastered on training videos, and a rhetoric that evokes medieval crusades, while in the year 2026, this year, the United States is engaged in a high-stakes confrontation with Iran. My video also examines how his Christian nationalist posture threatens the Pentagon's pluralist foundations, undermines unit cohesion, and jeopardizes America's constitutional promise of religious freedom. From diversity to devotion, within weeks of taking office, Hegseth announced the suspension of several diversity, equity, and inclusion, otherwise known as DEI, initiatives, replacing them with compulsory prayer gatherings and a traditional chaplaincy that privileges evangelical Christianity. The shift is more than symbolic. By earmarking official time for worship and encouraging the chaplains to frame operational objectives in biblical language, the Department of Defense, now known as the Department of War, is blurring the line between church and state that the founders worked so hard to draw. Policy on transgender service members Hegseth's administration has also reinstated a ban on transgender individuals serving in combat roles, arguing that the policy preserves unit readiness while simultaneously invoking a moral imperative rooted in his interpretation of Scripture. Critics contend that the restriction is not evidence-based, but rather a manifestation of a faith-driven worldview imposed on a diverse fighting force. Eroding trust among troops. The armed services depends on a shared belief that every service member will be judged by performance, not creed. When leadership begins to elevate one religion above all others, it fuels suspicion among those who do not share that faith. Recent internal surveys reveal that more than 200 service members have formally complained that the new Christian-centric culture infringes on their constitutional rights and creates a hostile environment. Historical parallels. The danger of conflating religious zeal with state power is not abstract. The Inquisition, the Crusades, and other episodes of religiously motivated violence demonstrate how quickly devotion can morph into oppression. The Constitution's Establishment Clause was drafted precisely to prevent such outcomes. By reopening the door between pulpit and policy, Hegseth risks repeating those dark chapters on a modern global stage. A message to allies and adversaries. The United States has long billed itself as a bastion of secular democracy. When its highest military officer frames the conflict with Iran as God's divine plan and likens President Trump to a messianic figure, the signal sent abroad is one of religious partisanship rather than rational statecraft. Allies accustomed to predictable, apolitical U.S. leadership may question the reliability of American commitments, while rivals could exploit the rhetoric to fuel anti-American sentiment. Undermining the rule of law. By encouraging commanders to invoke biblical destiny in operational briefings, Hegseth blurs the distinction between moral persuasion and legal authority. The result is a Pentagon that may prioritize doctrinal narratives over the strategic calculus demanded by complex multinational conflicts. The separation of church and state. The First Amendment was designed to protect both government from religious domination and individuals from government coercion. Mandatory prayers, overt biblical messaging, and official communications and policies justified on scriptural grounds are at odds with that constitutional guarantee. Legal scholars warn that continued violations could invite judicial intervention, potentially curtailing the very authority Hegseth seeks to expand. Protecting pluralism. America's military has historically been a microcosm of the nation's diversity, drawing strength from soldiers of every faith, ethnicity, and gender. Preserving that pluralism is not a matter of political correctness. It is a strategic asset that sustains morale, innovation, and the moral high ground essential for democratic warfare. Pete Hegseth's tenure as the nation's chief civilian defense officer marks a stark departure from the secular, inclusive tradition that has underpinned the United States Armed Forces for generations. By replacing DEI programs in the military with evangelical worship, outlawing transgender service, and cloaking geopolitical strategy in crusader imagery, he risks fracturing unit cohesion, damaging diplomatic credibility, and violating the constitutional walls separating church and state. The remedy is to reaffirm that the Pentagon, as a national institution, must remain neutral in matters of faith. Upholding that neutrality safeguards the military's professionalism, preserves the liberty it is sworn to defend, and ensures that America's greatest strength continues to be its commitment to a pluralistic, democratic ideal. The call to action is clear. Citizens, lawmakers, and military leaders alike must demand a Pentagon that respects all beliefs, honors the Constitution, and stays focused on its core mission: protecting a free and inclusive nation, not promoting a singular religious agenda. Now here's a call to action for you. Stay vigilant about the blending of religion and state power. Defend reproductive and LGBTQ+ rights and protect public education from ideological purges. Support institutions that uphold scientific expertise and inclusive curricula. Build coalitions across faiths, races, and political spectrums to safeguard the pluralistic democracy our Constitution guarantees. Only by confronting this modern crusade with reason, empathy, and collective resolve can we preserve a free, diverse America for generations to come. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment with your experiences battling religious coercion, and hit that bell to stay updated on future exposés. By doing so, you help the algorithm promote my videos to a bigger audience, and I would thank you very much. And if you enjoy the Secular Strike Back podcast and you live within the United States and want to support it, please consider making a $3 monthly donation by going to my Patreon and becoming a member. The link is in the description below. If you would like to see more of my videos specifically pertaining to that of Christian nationalism, you can do so by going to this playlist. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you the next time.